So since their formation in 1985, Radiohead have had a pretty fantastic career, having received 22 awards from 79 nominations, including a Brit Awards, Grammys, and an induction into the Hall of Fame. Radiohead are probably one of the biggest rock bands ever. However, one song more than any other stands out as a success story, and that is Creep. And in today's video, we're going to be looking at the music and the production techniques that went into making it. So the first thing I want to talk about is actually the chord sequence and the chords used in the song, as they're by far the most interesting and important feature of the entire piece. So right from the get-go, we're really clearly in G major. The entire band plays a big G major chord, with the bass taking the root and the guitars playing arpeggios above. So throughout the entire song, the chords change every single 2 bars relentlessly, with no exception, in a very strict chord sequence. So like I said, the first chord in this sequence is a G major, the next chord is a B major, the chord after this is a C major, and the chord after this is a C minor. Now the C minor and the B major are actually 2 really important chords, and I'll go into why that is now. Like from last week's episode, I've made a big list of chords that will work well in our key of G major. Now if you look carefully, you won't find a B major chord. You'll find a B minor chord on the 3, but you won't find a B major chord. Now this is because B major is actually what's known as a chromatic chord, which just means it's from outside the key, as chroma means colour in Latin, so it's adding colour to our music. So like I said in last week's episode, outside chords aren't bad, they just add different flavours or colours which can be used to good compositional effect, just like in Creep. Now this B major is actually a very specific kind of chromatic chord known as a chromatic mediant shift. Now that sounds complicated, but all the word mediant means is 3, so as the B minor is our 3 chord and we've replaced that with our B major, which is also the 3rd chord in the scale now, it's a mediant shift, as again mediant just means 3. So chromatic because it's outside, mediant because it's 3, and shift because it's a chord change. So that's why the B major is important in Creep. Now the next chord I want to talk about is another chromatic chord, the C minor chord. Now the reason this C minor chord is so interesting is because although C minor is not found in G major, it is found in G minor, which is G major's relative counterpart. So very briefly, when this chord is played, the entire music shifts from G major, which is our happy mode, to a G minor, which is our sad mode. Now this is actually emphasised by the bass line, which moves up through a G minor scale when this chord is actually played. Now this is actually a really effective compositional technique, as like I said, major chords and keys are supposed to be happy, but the lyrics of the song are actually quite dark and sad, so temporarily shifting to a minor key using a minor chord 4 actually gives this song a really sort of somber feeling and actually brings the lyrics home. However, that's not the end of the minor 4 chord, so moving away from Creep, Radiohead actually use this technique all the time in other songs such as No Surprises and Airbag, and I actually even think of it as the Radiohead chord because it's so iconic to the band. Now Radiohead's Creep has a very clear verse-chorus structure. Now if they're not using harmony to change between the sections, what do they actually do? So to distinguish between the 2 sections, what Radiohead do is they change the arrangement whilst keeping the underlying harmony the same. Now what most songwriters do is they have a chord sequence for the verse and a chord sequence for the chorus, as it helps to break the 2 sections harmonically, whereas Radiohead actually use the intensity of the instruments to make a clear division between the verse and the chorus. So if you wanted, you can actually take some inspiration from Creep and use this in your own music, so you can use a change of intensity or instrumentation as big musical landmarks when you're changing between sections, so like a verse, a middle 8 or a chorus. You could also experiment a bit and add a change in harmony or a change in key just to see if this helps increase or, work well with the effect. Now the last musical thing I want to talk about is the use of upbeat, or an anacrusis if you want to be posh, in the melody. So what is an upbeat? So all an upbeat is pretty simply where you start playing slightly before the beginning of a bar or phrase. So Creep is very clearly in 4/4, which means there are 4 beats per bar, and this is really easy to feel. Now I've notated a little bit of Tom York's melody, and you can see from my notation that he starts singing before the first phrase begins, and he lands very, very clearly with the rest of the band on a G. It's this little bit of music just before the start of the bar, which is known as an upbeat. So a really useful application for upbeats is tying important lyrics to the start of the bar. So in this example, the word angel is very important to the meaning of the song, so he obviously wants it to start at the beginning of the bar. However, that doesn't make a lot of sense lyrically, so by starting the phrase slightly early at the back end of the previous bar, the word angel gets the hit on that really strong musical beat and has a very important place in the song. So now that we've spoken about the musical techniques of creep, I now want to speak about the important production choices and how you can use those in your own music. So the first thing that strikes me is the drum production, particularly the sound of the reverb, or in other words, the sound of the room that the drum was recorded in. Now to me, I'd say that the drums of Creep were probably recorded in a fairly large and empty room just by the sound of their reflections and how long the decay goes on for. So if you wanted to apply this sound to your own tracks, how would you go about doing that? So if you're recording your own drum kit, I'd recommend setting up some room mics. Now one good setup for this could be a pair of distant overhead microphones, as they'll capture the sound, but like I say, from a distance, picking up more of the rooms. Alternatively, you could set up some room mics in the corners, as they'll pick up the reflections from the walls. Another good thing to note would be if your microphones have an omni capsule or setting, you should probably put this on, as it means the microphone will pick up sound in all directions, which is great for picking up reflections. Luckily, we're no longer in 1993, and we can actually use our computers to apply reverb to sounds in post, so you don't actually have to record it using a microphone. So to do this, go into whichever DAW you're using and set up a bus. Put a reverb plugin on this bus and send any channels that you want affected through the bus. Make sure your sends are turned up so that we're actually sending information to the bus, bring the fader level of the bus up, and hey ho, whatever you've sent through it will now have reverb applied to it. So the next production technique I want to focus on is the use of double tracking in the guitars during the choruses. So like I said earlier, Radiohead changed the instrumentation of the music in order to increase intensity during the chorus, as it helps big the song up. Not only do they do this, they actually double track the guitars, again to add weight and intensity. Now what this means is, you take the same part and play it twice, normally with a slightly different setting on the amp or a slightly different guitar, as it will help give variation between the two takes. So you take one of the tracks and pan it through the left speaker, and the other track and pan it through the right speaker. And the two slight differences between each of the takes will help create a central image with more weight and thickness, which is a really useful technique, especially in rock songs. So that's actually the end of the video. By no means was that the most comprehensive musical breakdown of Radiohead's Creep. There's also plenty more to talk about in terms of production, but I thought I'd cherry pick some of the more interesting elements of the song so that you can have a go in your own music. Maybe put a minor 4 cadence in your next piece, or a massive hall reverb on your vocal, and see if it inspires something new. Comment down below on a song that I should break down next, and please remember to like, share and subscribe, as it'd massively help the channel.